Why a Will Wade LSU reunion just became more real of a possibility than it has ever been before. I'll explain. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt McMahon. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for watching every weekday on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights from this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. As the LSU basketball season has continued its plunge into the depths of despair, there's this seeming foregone conclusion that Matt McMahon is going to be fired. And we've talked about that here on the show. If you're an everydayer, thank you for being here, and you've heard me say it. But ultimately, what it boils down to is that's not a foregone conclusion, at least not today, because donor fatigue is a very real thing. Again, I've asked 3 questions. Should they fire him? Could they fire him? Will they fire him? Should they? Probably so after this year with all the investment in the roster and to have the season you're having. Could they? Like financially, are there people around LSU who support LSU that could write checks? Yes. Will they? That becomes a cloudier question just because of all the donor fatigue after what they just did for football. And based on firsthand conversations I have had with some high-level donors, that donor fatigue is real. And there's not a lot of eagerness to jump in and write the kind of checks it's going to take to buy out Matt McMahon, his staff, hire a new coach, potentially pay the roster. Now, I think that would change if the target were Will Wade. And I have pushed back against that idea many times for a lot of reasons. Some are financial, some are the fact that Will Wade's at a basketball school that actually cares about basketball, and LSU doesn't. But he does, Will Wade and his family did love it here in Baton Rouge, and he did love LSU, and does believe that he could win a national championship at LSU. It would take a lot of doing. I still don't think that it is likely. But for the first time, I'll tell you it's possible, even if slightly, because of something that happened on Thursday. Now, normally, the Board of Supervisors appointing a new chairman or the governor appointing a new chairman to the Board of Supervisors would be back page news. It's just not that big of a deal. The Board of Supervisors largely is a ceremonial body. They don't actually have much autonomy. They rubber stamp what's pushed toward them. And the people that serve on the Board of Supervisors are governmental or gubernatorial appointees. The governor appoints the members of the Board of Supervisors. So typically, these are wealthy people who are donors or benefactors of the governor. And when board members term off, the new governor gets to appoint board members. And normally, those are people who were benefactors of his or her campaign. So just like Jeff Landry gets to appoint members of the Board of Supervisors, so too did John Bell Edwards before him and Bobby Jindal before him, and so on. Well, on Thursday, Governor Jeff Landry posted on social media, and it has been made official, that Scott Ballard is no longer the chairman of LSU's Board of Supervisors. The new chairman is Lee Mallett. Now, this is the most significant part of this story that can't be lost. And I'm going to give you some detail with things that we've talked about loosely, mostly back when Scott Woodward was fired. And I'm going to tell you this story, and it'll start to connect the dots a bit, so bear with me, okay? So if you don't know who Lee Mallett is, that's fine. Lee Mallett is a very successful businessman, very wealthy businessman from Southwest Louisiana, and he's a supporter of the governor. He also supported Bobby Jindal and was appointee to certain commissions and committees from under the Jindal administration. And he's now a member of the LSU Board of Supervisors, and he is a donor and benefactor of Jeff Landry's campaign. Lee Mallett, a year ago, you might remember there was a story that started to make the rounds about Will Wade possibly being rehired at LSU while he was at McNeese. And there was sources, there were stories that were anonymously sourced about people willing to push this through and pay for Matt McMahon's buyout and pay for Will Wade's contract and all that. Well, that was Lee Mallett. Lee Mallett, being in Southwest Louisiana, where Will Wade, of course, was at McNeese, was willing to, in a large way, support the buyout for Matt McMahon and the salary to get Will Wade from McNeese back to LSU. Scott Woodward was not willing to do that, despite the fact that Lee Mallett asked the governor to intervene. Governor spoke to Scott Woodward about it. Woodward wouldn't budge. So, by the way, that's one of the strikes against Scott Woodward. If you go back and listen to any of our episodes when Scott Woodward was fired or they mutually agreed to part ways, whatever, I told you some of this. It wasn't a key cog in the wheel, but it was part of the wheel. It was a cog in the wheel. Now it becomes way more relevant. So because Lee Mallett is now the chairman of the LSU Board of Supervisors, appointed by the governor, a governor who wants Lee Mallett to certainly get what he wants because he's a benefactor. And now he's in a position of even more authority as the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. So you can see where all this is going, how all these dots connect. The man who was driving the bus to get Will Wade back to LSU a year ago is now the chairman of the LSU Board of Supervisors, appointed by the governor. So that alone is a gigantic, whoa, light bulbs flashing, like, pay attention to this. Again, and I'm going to go through here in a second, a lot of the roadblocks and a lot of why this probably won't happen. But when you see this move on Thursday, it is something that you, at bare minimum, have to consider as a possibility. There's a lot that still would have to happen to make this work. But for the first time ever in this conversation, I'm at least willing to consider the possibility of this. Now, I want to say this before I go any further, that a year ago when Scott Woodward did not bring Will Wade back, that was the right decision. So too was it the right decision to fire Will Wade when they did. And I say that as someone who adores Will Wade. Will was great to me when he was the coach at LSU. He came on my show. We had a very friendly and courteous professional working relationship. I thought he was awesome. He made LSU fans care about LSU basketball. I think Will Wade's awesome. I wish that he was 24 months later than he was. I mean, everything he did is legal now, and he can win. He's showing it right now at NC State. But the NCAA at the time was holding off on a ruling on LSU football because they wanted their pound of flesh from Will Wade. And until they got their pound of flesh from Will Wade, they would not issue a ruling on LSU football. And there was just no reality where LSU should ever sacrifice football to retain a basketball coach. You were willing to sacrifice Will Wade to preserve the football program, and it was 100% the right decision. And I asked the athletic director who fired that coach amid scandal to rehire that coach is not a realistic thing that should ever happen. But as we've seen, this governor has a way of being massively influential and getting done what he wants done, whether it makes sense or not, whether people agree with it or not. I mean, he put Omar the Tiger on the field. A lot of people didn't like that. He pushed Scott Woodward out. I didn't like that. But he's also had a way of doing things that are very beneficial. His choice for the LSU system president was Wade Roos, and that seems to be going awesome. So there's strikes and gutters, there's good and bad, but he's an influential guy who, when he makes his mind up on something, is going to work to get it done. And it feels like Jeff Landry and Lee Mallett have their mind made up that they're trying to get Will Wade back in Baton Rouge. And I don't know that it's gonna happen. I don't know that it's likely, but we got to consider the possibility. So what are those roadblocks? We'll get to that next as we continue here. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If you're hiring, you wouldn't just want someone who could help. You'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what you love about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. And the stat that says it all, in the minute or so that we've been talking, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. The Winter Games are officially here. And if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. Curling, anyone? And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sport you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Speed skating races decided by inches. Niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. So we've established why the power players and how the power players have lined up to potentially make a run at Will Wade. How could it potentially not get done? Well, there are a lot of roadblocks. One is donor fatigue, and we've talked about that here. The financial component of this is very real. You just had to go to your donors to secure $54 million to buy out Brian Kelly, $91 million committed for Lane Kiffin, his whole staff. You've committed more than $40 million to this football roster. I mean, you are talking about, when it's all said and done, $200 million in committed money. That is a giant lift. And now you want to do it for basketball a month later? That's a tough ask. And I'm telling you, I personally have had firsthand conversations with high-level LSU donors that are not eager to do this. The thing that would change that potentially is Will Wade. Will Wade would get people excited enough to where they would pick up the phone, answer those calls, and potentially write checks. If LSU had the opportunity to get Will Wade back, not only would you get maybe some of those primary donors involved, I think you would engage new money as well. And of course, Lee Mallett is sitting there, as we mentioned, driving the bus and could certainly be involved here. So that's one that you could clear because it's Will Wade. I don't know that this is true for any other coach. To be perfectly honest, I don't know that there is a realistic target out there that LSU could go after that would make a donor base excited enough to do this financially. Will Wade would do that. There's great coaches, but some coaches just aren't realistic. I mean, can you get Bruce Pearl out of retirement? I mean, that would probably do it too, but like, you're not getting Todd Golden from Florida. Dude just won a national championship. Like, who would it be that would get you excited? The answer is Will Wade. The list is one. It's Will Wade. Now, how do you get him away from NC State is probably the biggest roadblock. NC State is 18-7 right now. They're 9-3 in the conference. In Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology, they have NC State projected. He has NC State projected as an 8 seed. One of the things I've talked about pretty routinely with Will Wade and NC State is he's at a school that cares about basketball, in a conference that cares about basketball. Now, the SEC has shown a much greater commitment to basketball recently. That's undeniable. If 14 teams make the tournament a season ago, so I'm not minimizing that, but I'm talking about historically and historical significance in men's college basketball. Kentucky cares. Arkansas cares. That's about it. Auburn has gotten good lately. Bama's gotten good lately with Nate Oates because they hit. Todd Golden, of course, you had just won a national championship. So Billy Donovan was there. So they've had pockets of success, but the consistent investment in basketball in the SEC hasn't been there. It is in the ACC. So would he leave a basketball school for a place that isn't a basketball school, a place where he had to complain about water leaking in through the roof of the practice facility there at LSU? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is Will Wade does love Baton Rouge. His family loves Baton Rouge. He loved being at LSU. He thinks he can win a championship here. So for the right price, I think he would at least entertain it. But would NC State let him leave? Keeping in mind, like, they won 6 straight conference games. Like, that hasn't happened there like 5 decades. I mean, he is doing something and injecting life at NC State the same way he did here. So NC State's not going to be super eager to let him walk out the door. Would they give him a new contract, a pay raise? Would they pay him more, commit more to NIL or rev share? Probably. There's the financial component of this as well, as far as what it would take to pay Will Wade. Now, his buyout at NC State is $5 million before April 1st. So after April 1st, that $5 million buyout drops to $3 million. Again, I had a conversation with a booster at LSU, mentioned the buyout, and this booster's reaction to that was, it's, quote, not too bad. So it just goes to show you how different the mindset is when you're talking about basketball as compared to football. So a $3 million buyout after, if you waited until after April 1st. Now, again, NC State's going to be in the NCAA tournament. So they're going to be in the tournament. What if they go on a deep run? What if they make the Sweet 16? What if they make the Final Four? Like, is Will Wade going to leave a Final Four team for LSU? Probably not. It becomes far more complicated. Now, we did just see Lane Kiffin leave Ole Miss amid a playoff run at Ole Miss for LSU. Football, different beast than basketball. But again, just another variable to consider. Will Wade's salary is $2.5 million with escalators throughout his time there that gets him to about $3.5 million. You'd have to pay him more than $2.5 million. You'd have to get to $3.5 million per year to get him away. And you'd also have to commit $10-12 million per year for your roster. Is there the appetite to have that type of commitment for men's basketball at LSU? I don't know that I can answer that to the affirmative. The other thing, too, is Verge Osbury. Listen, Verge didn't hire Will Wade. He was there on administration when Will Wade was fired. And I've never had this conversation with Verge or Will. I have had this conversation with people associated with LSU athletics. And maybe that's not the best relationship there with Verge and Will. And that could be a sticking point if Verge Osbury is making the hire. Is Verge Osbury making the hire? I don't know the answer to that. But remember where this started. With a very influential governor who seems to just, elbow his way through a crowd to get where he wants to go and what he wants to have happen. And if this is the thing he wants done, I mean, he's already forced out one athletic director for not, bending the knee at his will. I'm not suggesting he would force out Verge Osbury, but could he have major influence here, especially with the new chairman of the Board of Supervisors, who has to, by the way, rubber stamp hires for the athletic director? It gets a little complicated there when we start to have the conversation that way. Again, I would put this at a 17% chance. Way more likely he stays at NC State than ends up in Baton Rouge. And this is going to evolve. That could change. That number could change. What if NC State starts losing? What if word gets around that Will Wade might be interested and the money makes sense? Like, it could change. That number could change. But the best way to say it right now is it's not likely. I doubt very seriously it happens. But with Thursday's news of Lee Mallett being the new chairman of the LSU Board of Supervisors working under this governor, you at least better be considering the possibility. What do we say in coaching changes? Believe nothing, consider everything. Even the possibility of Will Wade, as improbable as it may sound, ending up back in Baton Rouge. We'll follow it. Okay, quick break. Speaking of a future matchup between LSU and SMU in football has changed venues. I'll tell you why next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. This is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. Since we've been talking about the hardwood, how about we talk about the women, as a matter of fact, because the bottom line is men's team's not really worth talking about right now. The women have a gigantic game on Valentine's Day with Dawn Staley, South Carolina team coming in. Kim Mulkey yet to beat Dawn Staley as the head coach at LSU. Great opportunity with Michaela Williams and Flau'jae Johnson and Jada Richard and Malaysia Fawali. By the way, former Gamecock Malaysia Fawali, who came over to LSU this year, maybe trying to help the Tigers get that notch for Kim Mulkey. These moments remind us of what it takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it the extra fire, the grit, the I never quit. Mazda puts the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. And we're brought to you by our friends at Our Lady of the Lake, championship health partner of LSU athletics. At LSU, trust isn't given, it's earned. And just like LSU athletes earn every point on the court, FMOL Health, Our Lady of the Lake, earns trust every day. As LSU's championship health partner, they take care of the Tigers on the court and across Louisiana. Players like DJ Thomas, Flau'jae Johnson, Jada Richard, Michaela Williams, they trust the Lake to keep them healthy, strong, and in the game. And it's not just for athletes. From sports medicine to pediatrics, heart care to recovery, Our Lady of the Lake brings that same championship level care to every family they serve. Trust the team that cares for the team you love. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU, together we roar. Learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU. The 2028 matchup between LSU and SMU is moving venues. It'll now be played at Jerry World in Arlington. This might come as a surprise to some. And if you're not familiar, when we look at the future matchups with LSU, forgive me, 2029. I said 2028. Sorry, 2029. The future 2029 matchup has moved to Jerry World. It's a home and home with LSU and SMU. 2028. LSU and SMU will play in Tiger Stadium. Then LSU makes the return trip, which was scheduled to be at Gerald Ford Stadium on SMU's campus. The obvious reason that this game is moving is for capacity, so SMU could sell more tickets for their home game. Remember, this is a good lesson why LSU would often schedule these neutral site openers, which became very common for LSU over the past, couple of decades. It was starting with 2010 when they played North Carolina in that marquee opener in Atlanta, and then so on. Of course, 2011 they played Oregon and Jerry World, and we can go through the years. TCU and Jerry World, the Lambeau, Houston home and home with Wisconsin, neutral site home and home. Florida State, they played BYU. The game that was supposed to be in Houston got moved to New Orleans in the Superdome. Anyway, those games are super beneficial because all you do is show up and collect a check. It's an independent group that runs those games, that organizes those neutral sites. You don't have to worry about the hassle of a home game, which are great for fans. But remember, things you don't think about is we got to stock the stadium with toilet paper and with paper towels and with concessions. And then you have to hire concession workers and ticket takers and parking attendants. And then you got to clean up afterwards and all the things that go into a home game. And then when you make the return trip, you're not making what you'd make on a home game. You're making what you would have pay out. Like we hear, okay, Louisiana Tech's coming to LSU. They're getting $1 million or whatever it is. Like that's the equivalent of what you get when you make the return trip. You get the big financial boon for the home game, but the return trip doesn't. It's easy when you go play the neutral site opener because you just show up and get a check, a big check, and a home game equivalent check. But LSU fans want games on campus, and so the administration has moved towards scheduling more home and homes as a way to try to appease the fans, get better home games. Well, SMU, obviously, in the return trip, is going to have to pay out to LSU. Well, if they're playing in a 34,000-seat stadium at Gerald Ford Stadium, that's not going to be nearly as lucrative as going to play in Jerry World. They're going to be able to sell more tickets. Now, primarily, that's going to be LSU fans, not SMU fans, but financially, it's going to make more sense. Remember, Georgia Tech did the same thing this year when they played their game against Georgia. It was Georgia Tech's home game, but instead of playing that at Bobby Dodd Stadium in downtown Atlanta, Georgia Tech played their home game against Georgia this year in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, where it was basically a pro-Georgia crowd, but Georgia Tech was able to make more money financially playing at a larger venue where they could sell more tickets. So it's the same thing with this game in Jerry World. It'll effectively be a partisan LSU crowd because of the LSU fans that can travel from Louisiana, but also Houston and the large alumni bases in Houston and Dallas. But this is an opportunity for SMU, who will come to Baton Rouge in 2028, and then they'll make the return for SMU to have a better financial win in 2029 when they get the home game against LSU. The other thing that you got to keep an eye on is, what does the SEC do with future Power 4 non-conference requirements? Remember, the SEC's gone to 9 league games now. And so the mandate of playing a Power 4 non-conference opponent could very well go away, maybe before this series even happens in 2028 and 2029. We'll see. But LSU also has future home and homes with Utah all the way through 2030 and 2031. So the future of SEC and LSU football schedule still very much up in the air. But for now, the 2028-2029 series home and home with SMU is on. 2028 in Baton Rouge, the 2029 game moved from Gerald Ford Stadium on SMU's campus to Jerry World, Cowboy Stadium, or AT&T Stadium there in Arlington. Of course, if we learn more, we'll follow it here on Locked on LSU. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen every single day. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And I've mentioned before as well, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. It would still be a giant help if you would just open up your favorite podcast app and just hit subscribe to the audio podcast as well. That's one way you can help us grow. So thank you sincerely for that. Until next time, it's Locked on LSU, your team every day.